Get in the car here. No one survives alone.
A blizzard roars across Montana's frozen plains, hiding a scene that stops a warrior's heart. Cena Black Wolf, a Comanche leader scarred by battle, rides through the 1875 storm, his past heavy as the snow. Then he sees her, a woman, alone with 5 children, defying death's icy grip. One choice sparks a tale of courage, redemption, and a bond forged in fire. Will they find a home where winters no longer bite? Share where you're watching from, and subscribe for stories that grip your soul. Stay to uncover how 2 broken lives weave a future from pain. Secrets and sacrifices await. Don't miss the ending that changes everything. Snow clawed at the Montana night, a white fury screaming across the wagon trail in the winter of 1875. Cena Black Wolf, a Comanche leader at 35, leaned into the storm, his gloved hands tight on the reins of his horse-drawn cart. His black eyes, sharp as a hawk's, pierced the blizzard's veil, catching glints of ice on the pines. Scars from battles, against soldiers, raiders, and time, etched his angular face, half hidden by a buffalo hide hood. His long hair, tied with rawhide, whipped against his neck as the wind howled like a wounded beast. Beside him, Ranger, a gray-furred hunting dog, sat rigid, ears pricked, his breath steaming in the frigid air. Cena was bound for the old lodge, a husk of timber and ash, since fire claimed it 5 years back when he led warriors against land thieves. Tonight, he craved solitude, a chance to let the ghosts of fallen brothers gnaw at his soul in peace. The cart creaked over ruts, wheels grinding through snowdrifts. Ranger growled low, a rumble that cut through the storm's wail. Cena eased the reins, his pulse quickening, not from fear, but the instinct of a man who'd survived too many ambushes. The lantern's dim glow swayed, casting shadows on the trail. Then he saw it. A figure staggering against the wind, not a deer or a broken post, but human, alive, and fighting. He pulled the horse to a stop, the beast snorting clouds of vapor. Through the snow's haze, a woman emerged, her thin frame wrapped in a tattered wool cloak. Clara Bennett, though he didn't know her name yet, clutched an infant to her chest, her pale face gaunt, blonde hair plastered to her cheeks by melting frost. Behind her, 4 small girls stumbled, their coats too thin, their faces blue-tinged, hands clutching each other against the cold's bite. Cena's breath caught, not from the chill, but from the sight. No man of the frontier could ignore a family facing death in such a storm. Clara's eyes, green as sagebrush, met his, flashing fear and defiance, like a cornered mare ready to bolt or fight. She stood her ground, shielding her children, her body trembling but unyielding. The wind tore at her cloak, revealing a bruise's shadow on her wrist, a mark that told Cena this wasn't just a lost traveler. She was running, hunted by something worse than the blizzard. He swung down from the cart, his boots sinking into the snow, the buffalo hide coat flapping like a war banner. Ranger leapt beside him, silent but alert, his fur dusted white. Cena raised a hand, palm open, his voice cutting through the gale, low and steady as a drumbeat. "Get in the cart," he said. "No one survives alone out here." His words carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many bones, bleached by the plains, too many lives claimed by pride or folly. Clara hesitated, her gaze darting from Cena to Ranger, then to her daughters, whose shivers shook their frail frames. The eldest, no older than 10, pressed closer to her mother, her eyes wide but fierce, a tiny guardian. The infant whimpered, a faint sound swallowed by the storm. Clara's jaw tightened, weighing the stranger against the certainty of freezing. Something in Cena's stance, broad shoulders squared, eyes unflinching but not cruel, tipped the balance. She nodded, a single jerk of her head, and stepped forward. Tsina moved fast, his hands gentle but sure. He lifted the smallest girl first, her weight barely more than a saddlebag, and set her in the cart under a pile of elk hides. The others followed, their frozen fingers clutching the furs as Ranger nosed them, his warmth a quiet promise. Clara climbed in last, cradling the infant, her eyes never leaving Tsina, still wary, still ready to run if he proved false. He shut the cart's gate, the wood thudding against the storm's roar, and climbed back to the driver's seat. The horse snorted, eager to move, and Tsina flicked the reins, guiding them toward the lodge. The trail stretched ahead, a tunnel of white, but the lodge wasn't far, a mile, maybe less. Tsina's mind raced, not with plans but with questions. Who was she fleeing? Why risk her children in this hell? The bruise on her wrist burned in his memory, a sign of a man's cowardice. Ranger shifted, his low whine a warning to stay sharp. Tsina glanced back, seeing Clara's silhouette, her arms wrapped around her children, her face a mask of endurance. The storm screamed, but the cart rolled on, carrying 6 souls toward a firelit refuge, a place where answers might come, and where a warrior's solitary winter was about to change forever. As the cart vanished into the blizzard's maw, the Montana night seemed to hold its breath, guarding secrets yet to unfold. Inside Tsina Blackwolf's lodge, the storm's howl dulled to a muffled moan, clawing at the timber walls patched with hides. The fire in the iron stove crackled, casting jagged shadows across the dirt floor, where elk pelts and woven mats softened the cold. Tsina, his buffalo coat slung over a chair, knelt by the stove, feeding it pine logs. His broad frame, honed by years of riding and fighting, moved with a warrior's precision, but his black eyes flickered with unease. The lodge, a ghost of his Comanche past, hadn't sheltered anyone but him since the fire 5 years ago. Now it held 6 strangers, their presence heavy as the smoke curling upward. Clara Bennett sat closest to the fire, her infant cradled in her lap, the child's faint breaths barely audible. Her blonde hair, damp and tangled, clung to her pale cheeks, and her green eyes, sharp with vigilance, tracked Tsina's every move. The 4 girls huddled under a bear hide, their small bodies pressed together, faces still pinched from the cold. The eldest, with hair like her mother's, clutched a younger sister's hand, her gaze darting between Clara and the Comanche leader. Ranger, the gray-furred dog, sprawled near them, his amber eyes soft but alert, his warmth a silent anchor for the children. The air smelled of burning wood and wet wool, thick with unspoken questions. Tsina rose, his boots scuffing the floor, and set a tin kettle on the stove. The hiss of water broke the silence, but not the tension. Clara's fingers tightened around her infant, her bruised wrist catching the firelight, a purple shadow that spoke of a man's cruelty. She hadn't said a word since the cart, but her silence was louder than the storm. Tsina recognized it, the quiet of someone who'd learned to swallow fear to survive. He'd seen it in warriors before battle, in women at trading posts, their eyes haunted by men who broke more than promises. "Name's Clara Bennett," she finally said, her voice low, like a blade drawn slow. "Wife of Tawan, a Lakota hunter." She paused, her jaw tight, as if the words burned. "Was a good man once, when he took me from the settler camp, promised a life by the river. But whiskey and no sons turned him mean. His hands—" She trailed off, glancing at her girls, who flinched at the mention of their father. "We ran. Couldn't stay." Tsina nodded, his face unreadable, but his hand stilled on the kettle. He knew men like Tawan, men who let shame fester into rage, who swung fists to feel strong. The frontier bred them, white and native alike, their violence a poison seeping into families. He poured hot water into tin cups, passing one to Clara, then set a plate of jerky and hardtack on a crate. The girls eyed the food, hungry but hesitant, until Clara nodded. They ate in silence, the crackle of the fire filling the gaps. He sat across from her, the stool creaking under his weight. "Seen a black wolf," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "This lodge was my family's. Burned when I was fighting settlers stealing our land. Been alone here since." He didn't mention the battles, the screams of horses, or the brothers he'd buried, but his fingers, scarred and calloused, traced the edge of a knife sheath, betraying the weight of those years. Clara's eyes lingered on him, reading the lines of a man who carried ghosts as heavy as her own. The eldest girl, barely 10, whispered, "Will he find us?" Her voice trembled, not with cold, but dread. Clara's hand shot to her daughter's shoulder, firm but gentle. "Not tonight," she said, though her eyes flicked to the door, where wind rattled the latch. Sina caught the look. "No one's coming through that storm," he said, his tone flat but certain. "Ranger'd hear them first." The dog lifted his head, as if in agreement, and the girl relaxed slightly, her fingers loosening on her sister's hand. Clara sipped the hot water, her shoulders easing a fraction. "Why'd you stop?" she asked, her voice softer now, probing. Sina leaned back, the firelight carving shadows on his face. "Seen too many die out here. Men, women, kids. Frontier doesn't care who you are. You were alive, fighting. That's enough." His words hung in the air, simple but heavy, as stones dropped in a still pond. The fire dimmed, logs collapsing into embers. The girls drifted to sleep, curled under the hide, Ranger's steady breathing a lullaby. Clara stayed awake, her infant nestled against her. Sina added a log to the stove, the flames flaring briefly. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a fragile truce took root. Not trust, not yet, but a shared understanding between two souls shaped by loss. The night stretched on, the lodge a small island of warmth, holding back the cold and the past, at least until dawn. Dawn broke over Montana, a pale gray light seeping through the storm's fading roar, as if the land exhaled after a long fight. Inside Sina Black Wolf's lodge, the fire's embers glowed faintly, their warmth clinging to the timber walls. The blizzard had eased, leaving a heavy silence, broken only by the soft creak of the roof under melting snow. Sina stood outside, axe in hand, splitting logs with sharp, rhythmic swings. His breath steamed in the crisp air, his Comanche frame taut, muscles flexing under a deerskin shirt. Ranger paced nearby, the dog's gray fur dusted with frost, his ears twitching at every snap of a twig. Inside, Clara Bennett moved quietly, her blonde hair tied back, her green eyes less guarded, but still sharp. She swept the dirt floor, teaching her daughters to stack kindling, their small hands clumsy but eager. The infant slept in a cradle of hides, his breath steady, a sign the cold hadn't claimed him. Clara's eldest, a girl with her mother's fierce gaze, hummed a settler tune, her voice thin but clear. The lodge felt alive, its emptiness softened by the children's presence, though the weight of Clara's past lingered like smoke. She knelt by a weathered chest, searching for extra blankets to ward off the morning chill. Her fingers brushed something rough, a woven hide, its surface etched with a jagged, broken lightning pattern, a Lakota mark she'd seen in Towan's family. Her breath caught, sharp as a blade. She pulled the hide free, its edges frayed, smelling of sage and old fires. The pattern wasn't just familiar, it was a relic of Towan's father, a man lost to the mountains years ago before she'd joined his kin. Sina stepped inside, wiping sweat from his brow, his axe left by the door. He froze when he saw Clara clutching the hide, her face pale, eyes burning with a question she didn't need to ask. "Where'd this come from?" she said, her voice low. Each word a stone dropped in still water. Ranger sensed the shift, padding closer, his amber eyes fixed on his master. Tsina's jaw tightened, his black eyes meeting hers, not with defiance, but with a truth he'd buried too long. He removed his gloves, scars on his knuckles catching the dim light, and sat on a stool, the wood groaning under his weight. 15 winters back, he began, his voice steady but hollow. My horse went down on a cliff trail, storm like this one. I was pinned, half dead, the ravine waiting below. He paused, his fingers tracing the stool's grain, as if it held the memory. A Lakota man came through the snow, strong, kind-eyed, hair like night. He wrapped me in that hide, pulled me free. But the ledge gave way under him. He fell. I didn't. Clara's hands trembled, the hide slipping slightly. She knew the man, Towan's father, gone without a trace, leaving stories and grief. Tsina leaned forward, his voice softer, raw. I kept it, not to hide, but because facing his kin meant facing what I took. I was a coward for that. Clara stood, the hide falling to the floor, her daughters watching, wide-eyed. She scooped up her infant, motioning the girls to follow, and strode toward the door. Snow swirled in as she opened it, the cold biting her face. Tsina followed, his boots crunching, Ranger at his heels. "Clara," he called, his voice cracking like ice. She stopped, her back to him, the children huddled behind her, their breaths clouding the air. "He died saving me," Tsina said, the words heavy as iron. "I lived with that debt every day, but I never told his people. I should have." Clara turned, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with a pain older than the storm. 15 years, she whispered. Tawan grew bitter, waiting for a father who never came. That broke him before whiskey did. She shook her head, her voice steadying. "I can't forgive you. Not now." She led her girls back inside, the lodge's warmth a necessity, not a comfort. Tsina stood in the snow, his breath ragged, the weight of her words sinking deep. Ranger nudged his hand, grounding him. The lodge door shut, but the rift remained. If this story stirs your heart, please subscribe to join us for more tales of the frontier's raw truths, where courage and guilt collide. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep these stories alive. Inside, Clara sat by the fire, the hide folded beside her, her daughters silent. The day stretched ahead, cold and uncertain, but the lodge held them, a fragile shelter where wounds, old and new, began to surface, demanding to be faced. The Montana sun hung low, casting a brittle light over the snow-dusted plains, as if wary of the tension brewing in Tsina Blackwolf's lodge. 5 days had passed since Clara's discovery of the hide, and the air inside remained taut, like a bowstring drawn tight. Tsina worked outside, mending a sagging fence, his axe strikes precise, his Comanche frame unyielding against the cold. Clara kept to the lodge, teaching her daughters to braid cord, her green eyes distant but resolute. The children's laughter, once hesitant, now echoed faintly, though their glances toward the horizon betrayed a lingering fear. Ranger patrolled the yard, his gray fur bristling at every gust, as if he sensed a storm beyond the weather. A low rumble broke the morning's quiet, hooves, heavy and deliberate, churning the snow. Tsina dropped his axe, his black eyes narrowing as 3 riders crested the rise. Tawan led them, his broad Lakota frame hunched forward, hair loose and tangled, his face carved with resentment. 2 cousins flanked him, their rifles slung low, eyes hard as flint. Clara stepped onto the porch, her infant in her arms, the girls clustering behind her, their small hands clutching her skirt. Tsina moved to stand between them and the riders, his hand resting near the knife at his belt, Ranger growling softly at his side. Toan reined in his horse, the beast snorting steam. "You think you can steal my family, Comanche?" He spat, his voice thick with whiskey's edge. His gaze slid to Clara, a possessive glint that made her daughters flinch. Before Tsina could answer, another horse approached, Sheriff Maddox, his weathered face stern under a wide-brimmed hat, his badge glinting in the pale light. "Enough, Toan," Maddox said, his voice like gravel. "This ain't your land, and it ain't your call." Maddox dismounted, his boots crunching snow, his gray eyes scanning the scene. Tsina's steady stance, Clara's bruised wrist barely hidden by her sleeve, the children's fear. He'd seen too many women broken by men like Toan, too many families shattered on the frontier's edge. "Town's handling this," he said. "Carbon County doesn't settle family disputes with guns. We meet at the grain barn." Noon. Toan scoffed, but Maddox's stare held firm, and the Lakota spurred his horse away, his cousins trailing, leaving a cloud of snow and menace. The grain barn loomed on the outskirts of Carbon County, its weathered planks smelling of hay and dust. Inside, townsfolk gathered, ranchers, trappers, a few Lakota traders, their breaths fogging in the chill. Lanterns hung from beams, casting a dim glow over the crowd. Clara stood at the center, her blonde hair braided, her posture straight despite the weight of eyes on her. Her daughters sat on a bench, the eldest holding the youngest, their faces pale but defiant. Tsina leaned against a post, his arms crossed, his presence a quiet force, Ranger lying at his feet, ears pricked. Maddox called the meeting to order, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Clara Bennett's got a claim against Toan. She speaks, then he. Town decides." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady, each word deliberate. "Toan was kind when I met him, a hunter who promised a home, but no sons turned him bitter. Whiskey made him cruel. He hit me, scared our girls, left bruises that ain't just on skin." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing faded marks, her eyes locking on the crowd. "I ran into a blizzard to save my children. That's what he made us do." The barn fell silent, save for the creak of rafters. Toan stood, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "She's mine," he growled. "My girls, my rights. This Comanche's got no claim." His cousins nodded, but the townsfolk shifted, uneasy. The girls shrank at his voice, the eldest wrapping an arm around her sister. Maddox raised a hand. "Tsina, speak." Tsina straightened, his voice low, resonant. "Found them dying in the snow. Sheltered them. Seen what Toan's hands did. I'll stand for them, long as they need." His words were spare, but his scars and steady gaze spoke louder. A warrior's vow rooted in the frontier's code. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering. The townsfolk voted by a show of hands, a slow ripple of agreement. Toan's rights were stripped. Clara and her children were placed under the town's protection. Maddox turned to Toan. "Come near them again, and frontier law, real law, takes over." Toan's eyes blazed, but he stormed out, the barn door slamming, his cousins trailing. Clara exhaled, her shoulders easing, though her grip on her infant tightened. Tsina met her gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Not victory, but a step toward safety. The barn emptied, the crowd dispersing into the cold. Clara led her girls outside, their steps lighter, though the horizon still loomed. Tsina followed, Ranger at his side, the weight of the day settling into his bones. The lodge waited, a fragile haven, but the fight wasn't over. Toan's shadow lingered, and the frontier never forgave the unprepared. The Carbon County wind carried the bite of winter's end, whispering of a thaw as Clara and her children stepped from the grain barn, their shadows long on the snow. Spring crept into Montana, a shy guest brushing the plains with green, softening the frost that had gripped Sina Black Wolf's lodge for weeks. The lodge stood stronger now, its roof patched, a new room framed by Sina's steady hands. He swung a hammer with Comanche precision, his black hair falling loose, sweat beading on his scarred brow. Clara worked the earth, planting flax and coneflower along the porch, her blonde braid swinging as she taught her daughters to press seeds into the soil. The girls' laughter rang like bells, chasing Ranger across the yard, the dog's gray fur gleaming under a warming sun. The infant gurgled in a sling, his small hands grasping air, free from the blizzard's threat. Inside, the lodge smelled of sage and fresh timber, its walls no longer echoing emptiness. Clara stitched quilts from scraps, her needle flashing in the firelight, humming tunes that drifted like smoke. Sina carved wooden pegs for the new room, his knife steady, but his black eyes often lingered on the children, their ease a balm to his restless spirit. The frontier's code, protect, endure, rebuild, bound them, though Clara's unforgiving words about Towan's father still hung between them, a wound unhealed. Yet necessity forged a rhythm. Sina splitting logs at dawn, Clara braiding the girl's hair, the lodge becoming a home, not just a shelter. One morning, Sina loaded the cart with hides and smoked meat, his movements deliberate. "We're going to the Comanche camp," he said, his voice low, like a river over stones. Clara nodded, her green eyes steady, sensing the weight of the journey. The girls climbed aboard, their chatter bright, unaware of the past they'd confront. Ranger leapt in, tail sweeping, as Sina flicked the reins. The trail wound through hills, pines casting dappled shade, the air sweet with thawing earth. Clara's hands tightened on the infant, her thoughts drifting to Towan's father, the man whose death had shaped her husband's rage. The Comanche camp nestled in a valley, lodges ringed by cottonwoods, smoke curling from fires. Sina's kin greeted him with nods, their eyes curious but warm on Clara and the children. An elder, White Owl, a Lakota woman tied to Sina's band through old alliances, approached, her silver braid glinting, her face lined with wisdom. She led them to a lodge where sage burned, its scent weaving through woven blankets hung on the walls. Clara sat, the infant in her lap, the girls quiet beside her. Sina knelt, presenting the broken lightning hide, its pattern stark in the firelight. White Owl's eyes softened, tracing the hide. "This was his," she said, her voice a murmur. "Towan's father, my cousin. He walked the warrior's path." Sina spoke, his words raw but firm. "He saved me 15 winters ago on a cliff. Gave his life for mine. I carried that debt, silent, too long." Clara's breath hitched, her fingers still on the infant. White Owl touched the hide, her gaze piercing Sina. "A warrior's death is not a debt. It's a gift. He chose you to live." Clara's eyes met Sina's, the pain of her earlier refusal softening, not gone but shifting. White Owl turned to her. "You've walked a hard trail, child. This man stands for you now. Will you stand with him?" Clara hesitated, then nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "For my girls, for a home," the elder smiled, her hand steady as she draped a star quilt, blue, red, and gold, over Sina and Clara's shoulders, its weight a vow of unity, binding their fractured paths. The camp gathered that evening, drums pulsing under a sky streaked with fire. The girls joined a circle, their small hands clasped with others, their laughter mingling with chants. Ranger trotted among them, a strip of cloth tied to his collar, earning grins from the elders. Tsina and Clara stood beneath the quilt, their hands brushing, not clasped, but close. The ceremony was brief, rooted in the land's pulse, sealing a bond not of romance, but of survival, forged in shared scars. Back at the lodge, spring bloomed fully, grass piercing the earth, the air soft with promise. Tsina fixed a gate, Clara hung a quilt on the porch, and the girls ran with Ranger, their voices a song. Standing together, Tsina's hand found Clara's, calloused fingers against hers. "This land was ash and wind," he said, his voice rough but warm. "Now it's ours." Clara leaned into him, her braid catching the sun, and the lodge stood firm, a testament to two souls who'd tamed the frontier storms, building not just a home, but a future. The Montana plains fade, but Tsina and Clara's story lingers, a testament to resilience and redemption. What moved you most? Their courage, their scars, or the home they built from ashes? Drop your thoughts below. Your voice keeps these tales alive. We're grateful for your joining us on this frontier journey, riding through storms and starlit vows. Stay with us for more stories where broken souls find strength in the wild. Until we meet again under the wide sky, keep the fire burning and share this tale with someone who needs its warmth. Farewell for now, but the trail calls us back soon.